The first time Cassandra Vale stepped onto the stage of the Silver Spur Saloon in Tombstone, Arizona territory, every man in the room fell silent. And it was not just because of her voice. It was May of 1883, and the desert heat had driven miners, cowboys, and gamblers alike through the saloon doors seeking whiskey and distraction. But what they found instead was a woman whose bruises told a story darker than any ballad she sang. Her voice soared through the smoke-filled room like an angel's hymn, pure and crystalline, but the purple shadow along her cheekbone and the way she flinched when the saloon owner approached told a different tale entirely. Jake Malone had ridden into Tombstone 3 days prior with nothing but his horse, his rifle, and a determination to leave his past behind. The tall cowboy with sun-weathered skin and gray eyes had spent the last 5 years driving cattle from Texas to Kansas, saving every dollar he could, and now at 26 years old, he was looking to start fresh somewhere the law did not ask too many questions about where a man came from. He had taken a job at a nearby ranch, breaking horses for decent pay, and tonight he had come into town for a drink and maybe a card game. But when Cassandra began to sing, Jake forgot about cards, forgot about whiskey, forgot about everything except the haunting melody that seemed to reach inside his chest and squeeze his heart. She sang an old Irish ballad about lost love and distant shores, and her voice carried such genuine sorrow that Jake found himself leaning forward in his chair, his cards forgotten on the table before him. She wore a deep blue dress that had seen better days, the fabric worn at the seams, and her dark hair was pinned up in a style that might have been elegant if not for the visible trembling in her hands. When the song ended, the room erupted in applause and hollers, but Jake noticed how her smile never reached her eyes, how she scanned the crowd with something that looked like fear. The saloon owner, a thick-necked man named Dutch Brennan, grabbed Cassandra's arm as she descended from the small stage, his fingers digging into her flesh hard enough that Jake saw her wince. Dutch pulled her close and whispered something in her ear that made her face go pale. Jake felt his jaw tighten, his hands curling into fists on the table. He had seen men like Dutch before, men who thought owning a business meant owning the people who worked there. "Another round for everyone," Dutch announced loudly, shoving Cassandra toward the bar. "And the lady will be singing again in 20 minutes. Ain't that right, Cass?" Cassandra nodded quickly, her eyes downcast, and hurried behind the bar where she began pouring drinks with shaking hands. Jake watched as she worked, noting how she avoided eye contact with the patrons, how she seemed to make herself as small as possible. When a drunk miner reached across the bar to grab her wrist, she jerked back so violently that she knocked over a bottle, and Dutch was on her in an instant. "Clumsy fool," Dutch snarled, and Jake saw his hand rise. The cowboy was out of his chair and across the room before he consciously decided to move. His hand caught Dutch's wrist mid-swing, his grip iron tight. "I would not do that if I were you," Jake said quietly, his voice carrying a warning that made several nearby men step back. Dutch's face turned red with rage. "This is my saloon and my business. You best let go before I have you thrown out on your backside." "Your saloon, maybe," Jake said, not releasing his grip, "but that does not give you the right to strike a woman. Now I am going to let go of your wrist, and you are going to walk away and cool off. Understood?" For a moment, Jake thought Dutch might push the confrontation further, but the saloon owner must have seen something in Jake's eyes that warned him against it. Dutch yanked his arm free and stormed toward his office at the back of the saloon, muttering curses under his breath. Jake turned to find Cassandra staring at him with wide eyes, a mixture of gratitude and terror on her face. "You should not have done that," she whispered. "He will make me pay for it later." "Then you should leave," Jake said simply. "A woman with a voice like yours could sing anywhere. You do not have to stay here." Cassandra's laugh was bitter and broken. "You think I have not tried? Dutch owns my contract. I owe him money for my passage from St. Louis, for my room, for my dresses, for every meal I eat. By his accounting, I will be working off that debt for the next 10 years. And if I try to leave, he has made it very clear what will happen to me." Jake felt a familiar anger rising in his chest, the same righteous fury that had driven him to stand up to injustice more times than was probably wise. "How much do you owe him?" $300, Gia, Cassandra said, and the number sounded like a life sentence. "I will never have that kind of money. He pays me barely enough to eat." $300 was nearly everything Jake had saved. Every penny he had scraped together over 5 hard years of work. It was supposed to be the down payment on a small ranch of his own, a piece of land where he could build a life. But looking at this woman with her angel's voice and her hell-marked bruises, Jake found his priorities shifting. "I will be back tomorrow," he said. "Do not do anything to provoke him tonight. Just keep your head down and survive until tomorrow." Cassandra looked at him as if he were speaking a foreign language. "Why would you help me? You do not even know me." "Maybe that is exactly why," Jake said. "Because it is the right thing to do, and because no one should have to live like you are living." He left the saloon before she could respond, before he could second-guess the decision that would change both their lives. That night, Jake lay in his bedroll at the ranch bunkhouse and stared at the ceiling, thinking about Cassandra's voice and her bruises, about the fear in her eyes and the way she had flinched from Dutch's raised hand. He thought about the money he had saved and the dream he had carried for so long, and he realized that some things mattered more than land and cattle. Some things were worth any price. The next morning, Jake withdrew his savings from the Tombstone bank and rode back into town with the money in his saddlebag and a knot of determination in his gut. He found Dutch Brennan in his office behind the saloon, counting the previous night's receipts with greedy fingers. The saloon owner looked up when Jake entered, his expression darkening with recognition. "Come to cause more trouble, Cowboy?" Dutch asked. "Come to settle a debt," Jake said, placing $300 on the desk between them. "That is what Cassandra Vale owes you. I am paying it off. You write up a paper saying her contract is satisfied, and she walks out of here free and clear." Dutch stared at the money, then at Jake, his eyes narrowing with suspicion and calculation. "That is a lot of money for a woman you just met. What makes you think I will let her go for exactly what she owes me? Maybe I calculated wrong. Maybe she owes more." Jake leaned forward, his hands flat on the desk, his face inches from Dutch's. "You take that money? You write that paper, or I go to Marshal White and tell him how you have been keeping workers in debt bondage, which is against territorial law. I'm sure the marshal would be very interested to know how many other people you have trapped with impossible debts. Your choice." It was a bluff, but Dutch did not know that. The saloon owner's face cycled through several shades of red before he finally snatched up a piece of paper and scrawled out a brief statement declaring Cassandra's debt paid in full. He signed it with a vicious flourish and shoved it across the desk. "Take her then," Dutch spat. "She was more trouble than she was worth anyway. But you tell her if she ever shows her face in my saloon again, she will regret it." Jake took the paper and left without another word. He found Cassandra in the small room above the saloon where Dutch had housed her, little more than a closet with a thin mattress and a cracked mirror. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, still wearing the worn blue dress from the night before, and when she looked up at him, he saw that she had been crying. "I brought you something," Jake said, handing her the paper. Cassandra took it with trembling fingers, her eyes scanning the words once, twice, 3 times as if she could not believe what she was reading. "You actually did it," she whispered. "You paid him." "But why? Why would you give up so much for a stranger?" "Because you deserve better than this," Jake said simply. "Now gather your things. We are leaving." "Leaving to where?" Cassandra asked, standing up but looking uncertain. "I have nowhere to go, no money, no family. I came west because I thought I could make a life singing, but it has been nothing but one bad situation after another." "You come with me for now," Jake said. "The ranch where I work, they need someone to help with cooking and such. The owner is a decent man. He'll give you honest work for honest pay. And in your spare time, you can sing wherever you like, for whoever you like. Your voice belongs to you, not to men like Dutch." Cassandra gathered her few possessions into a worn carpet bag, everything she owned in the world fitting into one small container. As they descended the stairs and walked through the saloon toward the door, Dutch watched them with poisonous eyes, but said nothing. Several of the other saloon girls looked at Cassandra with envy and hope, and Jake made a mental note to see if there was something he could do for them as well once he figured out his own situation. The ride out to the ranch took an hour, and for most of it, Cassandra was silent, sitting behind Jake on his horse with her arms wrapped around his waist and her face pressed against his back. He could feel her shaking, whether from relief or fear or the simple shock of sudden freedom, he could not tell. When they finally arrived at the sprawling ranch that belonged to Samuel Garrett, an older man who had made his fortune in cattle and now spent his days breeding horses, Jake helped Cassandra down from the saddle. "Wait here," he said gently. "Let me talk to Mr. Garrett first." Samuel Garrett was a man in his 60s with a weathered face and kind eyes, and when Jake explained the situation, leaving out some of the more troubling details but making it clear that Cassandra needed help, the rancher nodded thoughtfully. "I have been thinking about hiring someone to help my wife with the cooking and housework," Samuel said. "She is getting older, and the work is getting harder. If this young lady is willing to work hard and keep out of trouble, she is welcome here. But Jake, that was your savings you spent. Your dream of your own place." "Some things are more important than dreams," Jake said. "Some things are more important than money." Samuel clapped him on the shoulder. "You are a good man, Jake Malone. Better than most. Now let us go meet this young lady and see about getting her settled." Cassandra proved to be a hard worker, rising before dawn to help Mrs. Garrett with breakfast and working late into the evening with cleaning and mending. She never complained, never asked for anything beyond what she was given, and in the evenings, when the work was done, she would sometimes sing for the ranch hands who gathered in the bunkhouse. Her voice transformed those rough men into something softer, something more human, and Jake found himself looking forward to those evenings more than anything else in his day. Weeks passed, and slowly Cassandra began to change. The bruises faded from her face and arms, and with them some of the fear faded from her eyes. She smiled more, laughed occasionally at jokes the ranch hands told, and Jake noticed that she had a sharp wit when she felt safe enough to show it. He found himself drawn to her in ways that went beyond simple attraction, though he certainly found her beautiful. It was her strength that captivated him, the way she had survived hell and still found the courage to trust again. One evening in late June, after the others had gone to bed, Jake found Cassandra sitting on the porch of the main house, looking up at the stars. He approached quietly, not wanting to startle her, and asked, "Mind if I sit?" "Please," Cassandra said, gesturing to the space beside her on the porch steps. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the night sounds of the desert, the distant howl of coyotes, and the rustle of wind through the sagebrush. Finally, Cassandra spoke. "I never properly thanked you," she said, "for what you did. You gave up everything you had saved for a stranger. I still cannot understand why." Jake was quiet for a moment, trying to find the right words. "My father was not a good man," he said finally. "He drank too much, and when he drank, he got mean. I watched him beat my mother for years before I was big enough to stop him. By the time I was 16, I was standing between them, taking the blows meant for her. When I turned 18, I left home, and I swore to myself that I would never stand by and watch a man hurt a woman, not ever again. So when I saw Dutch about to hit you, I did not really have a choice. It was just who I am." Cassandra reached over and took his hand, her fingers warm and soft against his calloused palm. "You are a good man, Jake Malone, the best I have ever known." "I am just a cowboy trying to do right," Jake said, but he did not pull his hand away. Over the following weeks, Jake and Cassandra spent more and more time together. He taught her to ride a horse, patiently guiding her through the basics until she could sit a saddle with confidence. She, in turn, shared stories of her life before Tombstone, how she had grown up in Boston, the daughter of a music teacher who had died when she was 15. Her mother had passed when she was just a child, and after her father's death, she had been left alone with no money and no prospects. Singing was the only skill she had, so she had headed west hoping to find work in the theaters and saloons, not understanding until too late what that life really entailed. I was so naive, she said one afternoon as they rode together across the ranch lands. I thought singing would be glamorous, that I would be treated like an artist. Instead, I found that most men saw me as just another saloon girl, there for their entertainment in every way. Dutch was not the first man to hurt me, but I was determined he would be the last. I just did not know how to escape until you came along. You would have found a way, Jake said. You are stronger than you think. Maybe, Cassandra said, but I am grateful I did not have to find out. I am grateful for you. By August, Jake had admitted to himself what had been true for weeks. He was falling in love with Cassandra Vale. It terrified him in ways that facing down armed men never had. Love meant vulnerability, meant risking his heart, meant the possibility of loss. But every time he saw her smile, every time he heard her sing, every time she looked at him with those deep brown eyes that had seen too much pain and were learning to see joy again, he fell a little deeper. He was not sure how she felt about him. She was friendly, affectionate even, but she had been hurt so badly that he worried she might never be ready to trust a man in that way again. So he kept his feelings to himself, content to be her friend and protector, unwilling to risk pushing her away by asking for more. But Cassandra had feelings of her own, feelings that grew stronger with each passing day. Jake had saved her life, but more than that, he had given her back her dignity, her freedom, her sense of self-worth. He treated her with respect, never made demands, never expected anything from her beyond friendship. He made her feel safe in a way she had not felt since her father was alive. And slowly, carefully, she found herself opening her heart to the possibility of love. The turning point came in early September when a group of men rode onto the ranch looking for work. Samuel Garrett was always willing to hire extra hands during the busy seasons, and he invited the men to stay for dinner while he decided whether to take them on. Cassandra was helping serve the meal when one of the men, a rough-looking character with a scar across his cheek, grabbed her wrist as she poured his coffee. "I know you," he said, his eyes narrowing. "You used to sing at the Silver Spur in Tombstone. I remember that voice. What are you doing playing housemaid out here?" Cassandra tried to pull her hand free, but the man held tight. "Please let go," she said quietly. "Maybe I will, maybe I will not," the man said with a nasty grin. "Maybe you and I should go somewhere private and you can sing for me special-like." Jake was across the room and had the man by the collar before anyone else could react. He hauled the stranger to his feet and half dragged him toward the door. "You are done here," Jake said, his voice deadly calm. "You get on your horse and you ride away. And if I ever see you near this ranch or near Miss Vale again, we are going to have a serious problem." The scarred man tried to protest, but one look at Jake's face convinced him it was not worth the fight. He and his companions left quickly, muttering among themselves. When Jake returned to the dining room, he found Cassandra standing exactly where he had left her, tears streaming down her face. "I am sorry," she said. "I am so sorry. I have brought trouble to your door, to Mr. Garrett's ranch. Maybe I should leave." "You are not going anywhere," Jake said firmly, taking her hands in his. "You did nothing wrong. That man was scum, and he is gone now. You belong here, Cassandra. You belong wherever you want to be." "I want to be with you," Cassandra whispered, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "Is that wrong? After everything that has happened, after all the men who have hurt me, I never thought I could feel this way about anyone. But when I am with you, I feel safe. I feel whole. I feel like maybe I could learn to be happy again." Jake felt his heart stutter in his chest. "There is nothing wrong with that," he said softly, "because I feel the same way. I have been falling in love with you since the first night I heard you sing, and every day since then I have fallen a little more. I did not say anything because I did not want to pressure you. Did not want you to feel obligated because of what I did." "You did not buy me, Jake," Cassandra said, stepping closer to him. "You freed me. There is a difference. And what I feel for you has nothing to do with obligation. It has everything to do with who you are, the goodness in you, the strength and the kindness. I love you, Jake Malone." Jake pulled her into his arms, holding her close, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, He felt completely at peace. "I love you too," he said against her hair. "I will protect you for as long as you will let me. I will stand between you and anyone who tries to hurt you. I promise you that." They stood there in the dining room, holding each other while the rest of the household pretended not to notice, giving them a moment of privacy in the midst of the busy ranch house. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling, and the weight that Cassandra had carried for so long seemed to lift from her shoulders. Samuel Garrett, who had watched the entire exchange with knowing eyes, approached them after dinner. "I suppose this means I am going to lose my best horsebreaker," he said with a smile. "Cannot say I am surprised. You two have been circling each other like nervous colts for weeks." "I am not going anywhere unless Cassandra wants to," Jake said, his arm around her waist. "We will work for you as long as you will have us." "What I want," Samuel said, "is for you two to be happy. Jake, you have been saving up for your own place. I know you spent that money on Cassandra's freedom, but you have earned more since then, and I have a proposition for you. There is 160 acres on the north edge of my property, good land with water. I have been thinking about selling it to someone I trust, someone who will treat it right. If you want it, I will give you a fair price and let you pay me back over time." Jake stared at the older man, hardly daring to believe what he was hearing. "Mr. Garrett, I cannot ask you to do that." "You are not asking, I am offering," Samuel said. "You are a good man, Jake, and you deserve a chance to build something of your own. And if you are planning to marry this young lady, you are going to need a place to call home." Cassandra looked up at Jake, her eyes shining with a hope and joy. "Is that what you want?" she asked. "To marry me." "More than anything," Jake said, "if you will have me. I know we have not known each other long, but I have never been more certain of anything in my life. I want to build a life with you, Cassandra. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. I want to hear you sing and watch you smile and protect you from anything that might hurt you. Will you marry me?" "Yes," Cassandra said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, I will marry you." Jake Malone. They were married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the ranch, with Samuel and his wife serving as witnesses and the ranch hands in attendance. Cassandra wore a simple white dress that Mrs. Garrett had helped her make, and Jake wore his best clothes, his hair slicked back and his boots polished to a shine. The local preacher from Tombstone performed the ceremony, and when Jake kissed his bride, the assembled crowd erupted in cheers and applause. The reception was a lively affair with music and dancing and more food than anyone could eat. Cassandra sang for the guests, her voice soaring into the desert night, and when Jake took her hand and led her in a dance, she felt a happiness so profound it brought tears to her eyes. This was what freedom felt like. This was what love felt like. They moved into a small cabin on their new land, and Jake spent every spare moment building and improving their home. He constructed a larger house, room by room, while Cassandra planted a garden and learned to manage their small household. Samuel sold them a few head of cattle and some horses to start their own herd, and slowly, steadily, they began to build a life together. Cassandra continued to sing, but now she sang in churches and at community gatherings, her voice bringing joy rather than serving as a commodity to be bought and sold. She sang at weddings and baptisms, at barn raisings and harvest festivals, and people came from miles around to hear the woman with the voice like heaven. And always, Jake was there beside her, proud and protective, her guardian and her love. The first year of their marriage was not without challenges. Money was tight, and the work of building a ranch from nothing was backbreaking and endless. There were times when Jake collapsed into bed so exhausted he could barely speak, and times when Cassandra worried that they had taken on more than they could handle. But they faced every challenge together, supporting each other through the hard times and celebrating the victories, however small. In the spring of 1885, Cassandra discovered she was pregnant. The news filled them both with joy and terror in equal measure. Jake worried about the risks of childbirth, especially in such a remote location, and Cassandra worried about whether she would be a good mother after growing up without one herself. But Mrs. Garrett proved to be a wealth of knowledge and support, and as the months passed and Cassandra's belly grew round, they both began to believe that everything would be all right. Their son was born on a cold December night, with Mrs. Garrett serving as midwife and Jake pacing a hole in the floor of their small parlor. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Jake feared he would lose both his wife and child. But Cassandra was strong, stronger than anyone gave her credit for, and when the baby's first cry split the night air, Jake felt tears streaming down his face. "A boy," Mrs. Garrett announced, placing the squirming bundle in Cassandra's arms. "A healthy, strong boy." They named him Samuel, after the man who had given them their start, and Jake held his son with trembling hands, marveling at the tiny, perfect fingers and the way the baby's eyes seemed to look right into his soul. "I will protect you," he whispered to his son. "I will protect both of you, always." Cassandra watched her husband with their child and felt her heart overflow with love. This man, this good and decent man, had given her everything: freedom, safety, love, family. He had seen her at her lowest point and had chosen to lift her up rather than take advantage of her vulnerability. He had become her protection when she needed it most, and now he was the father of her child, the partner of her heart. As their son grew, so did their ranch. Jake proved to be a skilled horseman and rancher, and their reputation for quality stock spread throughout the territory. Cassandra raised Samuel with love and patience, singing to him every night and teaching him to be kind and strong like his father. They added rooms to their house as their prosperity grew, and 3 years after Samuel's birth, Cassandra gave birth to a daughter they named Rose. Rose inherited her mother's voice and her father's determination, and from the time she could walk, she was following Jake around the ranch trying to do everything he did. Samuel grew into a quiet, thoughtful boy who loved books and learning, and Jake made sure to take him into Tombstone regularly to visit the small library there. Despite their different temperaments, the siblings were close, and Jake and Cassandra watched them grow with pride. Years passed in a blur of hard work and happiness. Jake never forgot where they had come from, the darkness that had nearly consumed Cassandra, and he made sure to teach his children about kindness and standing up for those who could not stand up for themselves. He told them stories of how he and their mother had met, leaving out the worst details but making sure they understood the importance of treating others with respect and dignity. Cassandra's voice never lost its beauty, and as she grew older, she began teaching music to children in the area, passing on the gift her father had given her. She started a small choir in Tombstone, and their performances became highly anticipated events. People would say that Cassandra Malone had a voice like heaven, and those who remembered her from her days at the Silver Spur would shake their heads in wonder at how far she had come. One evening in 1895, when Samuel was 10 and Rose was 7, Jake and Cassandra sat on the porch of their now substantial ranch house, watching the sunset paint the desert sky in shades of orange and gold. Their children were playing in the yard, their laughter carrying on the evening breeze, and Jake reached over to take Cassandra's hand. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. "Marrying me, I mean. Taking on this hard life?" Cassandra looked at him with surprise. "Regret it? Jake, you saved my life. You gave me everything I have, everything I am. How could I possibly regret loving you?" "I just wonder sometimes," Jake said. "With your voice, you could have been famous. You could have sung in theaters and opera houses. Instead, you are stuck here in the desert with a cowboy and 2 children and more dust than you can shake a stick at." Cassandra squeezed his hand. "I am not stuck anywhere. I am exactly where I choose to be. Fame means nothing compared to love, to family, to building something real with someone who sees you for who you truly are. You did not just protect me from Dutch Brennan, Jake. You protected me from a life of emptiness and exploitation. You gave me a home, a purpose, a reason to wake up every morning with joy in my heart. I would choose this life, choose you, 1,000 times over." Jake pulled her close, kissing her forehead. "I love you, Cassandra Malone. And I love you, Jake Malone. My protector, my partner, my love." They sat together as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, listening to their children play and feeling the solid weight of the life they had built together. It had not been easy, and there had been times when survival seemed uncertain, but they had persevered because they had each other. As the years continued to pass, their ranch prospered and their family grew closer. Samuel eventually went to university in California studying law, while Rose chose to stay close to home, marrying a local rancher and starting her own family just a few miles away. Jake and Cassandra became grandparents, delighting in the next generation and passing on their wisdom and love. They never forgot the difficult beginning of their relationship, and they used their own story to help others when they could. Jake made it a point to hire young men who were down on their luck, giving them a chance to prove themselves just as Samuel Garrett had given him a chance. Cassandra took in young women who found themselves in difficult situations, offering them work and protection and a safe place to rebuild their lives. One winter evening in 1910, when Jake was 53 and Cassandra was 48, they attended a performance by the Tombstone Community Choir, which Cassandra still directed. Among the singers was a young woman who reminded Jake powerfully of Cassandra as she had been when they first met, beautiful, talented, and bearing the subtle signs of mistreatment. After the performance, Jake and Cassandra approached the young woman, and within a week she was working at their ranch, safely away from the man who had been hurting her. This became their legacy, not just the successful ranch or Cassandra's beautiful music, but the countless lives they touched and changed through their kindness and willingness to help. They broke the cycle of violence and exploitation in their own small way, one person at a time, and their example inspired others in the community to do the same. In 1918, Jake and Cassandra celebrated their 33rd wedding anniversary surrounded by children, grandchildren, and friends from across the territory. Samuel came home from California with his wife and 3 daughters. Rose arrived with her husband and 4 sons. The ranch house, which had grown over the years to accommodate their expanding family, rang with laughter and music. Cassandra sang that night, her voice still clear and beautiful despite her age, and when she finished, Jake stood and raised his glass. "To my wife," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "who had a voice like heaven and bruises like hell when I met her, and who has been my blessing, my inspiration, and my love every day since. You made me a better man, Cassandra. You made me want to be worthy of you." "You were always worthy," Cassandra said, tears streaming down her face. "You were my protection when I needed it most, and you have been my partner in everything since. I love you, Jake Malone. I will love you until my last breath and beyond." They kissed to the applause and cheers of their family, and later that night, lying in bed in the darkness, Jake held Cassandra close and marveled at the life they had built from such dark beginnings. He thought about that first night in the Silver Spur, how he had been drawn to her voice and moved to action by her suffering. He had given up his savings, his dream of his own ranch to free her, and in return she had given him something infinitely more valuable: love, family, purpose, and a life filled with meaning. "What are you thinking about, Sir?" Cassandra asked, her head resting on his chest. "I am thinking about how lucky I am," Jake said, "how one decision, one moment of choosing to do the right thing led to all of this. If I had walked away that night, if I had decided your problems were not my concern, I would have missed out on the greatest blessing of my life." "We found each other," Cassandra said. "In the middle of the desert, in the middle of the darkness, we found each other. That is not luck, Jake. That is fate. That is love." Jake and Cassandra lived well into their 70s, watching their grandchildren grow and welcoming great-grandchildren into the world. The ranch remained prosperous under Samuel's management when Jake could no longer handle the physical demands of the work, and the family made sure to honor the values of kindness and protection that Jake and Cassandra had instilled in them. When Jake passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 76, Cassandra mourned deeply but found comfort in the knowledge that they had lived a full and beautiful life together. She continued to sing, her voice teaching and inspiring even in her grief, and she lived another 5 years, surrounded by family who loved her. On the day of Cassandra's funeral in 1928, the church in Tombstone was packed to capacity with people whose lives she had touched through her music, her kindness, and her example. Rose stood before the congregation and spoke about her mother's journey from darkness to light, about how Jake Malone had seen a woman in need and had chosen to become her protection, and how that single act of courage and compassion had rippled outward to touch hundreds of lives. "My mother had a voice like heaven," Rose said, her voice breaking with emotion. "But she also had bruises like hell when my father first met her. He could have walked away. He could have decided it was not his problem, but he chose to help, chose to love, chose to protect. And because of that choice, all of us are here today. We are the legacy of their love, the proof that one good person choosing to do the right thing can change the world." Jake and Cassandra were buried side by side on a hill overlooking their ranch, the land they had built together, the home they had created from nothing but love and determination. Their headstone bore a simple inscription: Jake and Cassandra Malone. He was her protection. She was his blessing. Together, they were love. Years later, their grandchildren and great-grandchildren would still visit that grave, would still tell the story of how a cowboy and a saloon singer had found each other in the Wild West and built a life that defied all odds. They would speak of Jake's courage and Cassandra's strength, of the bruises that had healed and the love that had endured, and they would remember that sometimes the greatest love stories begin in the darkest places, and that true protection comes not from strength alone, but from the willingness to stand up for what is right, no matter the cost. The ranch continued for generations, always bearing the Malone name, always operating on the principles of fairness and kindness that Jake and Cassandra had established. The community choir in Tombstone still sang Cassandra's favorite songs, and every year on the anniversary of Jake and Cassandra's wedding, the family gathered to celebrate their legacy and renew their commitment to the values of protection, kindness, and love. In the end, Jake Malone had been right that first night in the Silver Spur Saloon. Some things were more important than money, more important than dreams of land and cattle. Some things like love and honor and the courage to protect those who could not protect themselves were worth any price. And the reward for that sacrifice was not measured in acres or dollars, but in the richness of a life well lived, a love well earned, and a legacy that would endure long after the desert winds had worn away their headstone. The story of the saloon singer with a voice like heaven and bruises like hell, and the cowboy who became her protection, lived on as a testament to the transformative power of love, the importance of standing up for what is right, and the beautiful truth that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected places. Their love had started in darkness, but had grown into something bright and enduring, a light that continued to shine through the generations, proving that even in the wild and often brutal landscape of the Old West, true love could not only survive but flourish, creating something beautiful and lasting from the ashes of pain and despair.